everyone, and welcome back to our Simpson Associates YouTube channel and the big analytics query. I'm Tom, and today I'm joined by Joe to talk all things DevOps. So Joe, hello, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Thanks, Tom. I'm Joe Sumpner. I'm a solutions lead at Simpson Associates. So I look after all our innovation projects, and I've got a big experience in DevOps and using DevOps on projects. So I talk about DevOps today.
First, nice easy question. What is DevOps? Or maybe it's not easy. It seems quite a big, complex thing.
So DevOps can often get confused, and particularly with some of the tooling that's out there for DevOps. So DevOps itself doesn't really have an agreed definition, but generally it's a combination of processes, people, and tools to continuously deliver value on projects. There is then also Azure DevOps within the Microsoft space, which doesn't particularly help when you're trying to figure out issues with DevOps, but Azure DevOps is essentially an application that helps you deliver DevOps within your organization. So there's a bit of a confusion sometimes. It's often similar to Git versus GitHub, with Git being a source and version control system, GitHub being an application that lets you use Git along with many other things. So there's a bit of a comparison there between DevOps and Azure DevOps.
And what are some of the features that you can get within Azure DevOps?
So Azure DevOps is actually a set of tools that allow you to use some of the DevOps capabilities. So Azure repos for some source and version control, Azure boards for planning and work tracking, Azure pipelines for CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. It has test plans in there as well for managing tests, and artifacts as well for some package management on top of that as well. So lots of different capabilities, and each one of those has many benefits and features within there as well.
Almost on a more practical level, how actually is DevOps used? How would I go about using?
Well, you can use DevOps in lots of different ways, and you don't have to use everything all at once or even at all. You can just start small and build up to improve the overall efficiencies within your teams. So some of the key things would be around code management. So Azure repos allows you to store code. You get sort of source of version control capabilities from that. So either using Git or using Team Foundation version control. Well, that's considered a bit legacy these days. So generally any newer projects, you would use something like Git, and that's what you'll see in the wider industry. So source of version control lets you have, obviously store the code in one place, have version and sort of the historical changes that have been made. So every time somebody makes a change to code, there'll be a commit that's added within Git. So that commit contains who made the change, when they made it, and actually what they made as well. So if it's text-based files that you're working with, you can actually see the differences between different changes in the repository, in the code base. So you can see exactly what a developer changed and when they changed it, and they can also include a message as to why they changed it as well. So lots of visibility. It's not necessarily for a blame game in case something goes wrong, but there is the ability to roll back in case there are issues and things as well. But it's just that sort of that visibility, that auditability of what's changing in your system, so that you can easily react to things a lot quicker.
And you mentioned the continuous improvement, continuous development. How does that work within the world of DevOps?
So there's lots and lots of capabilities within DevOps and specifically within Azure pipelines, but actually it all integrates together as well. That's one of the sort of the key points of Azure DevOps. So pipelines let you build or build pipelines and release pipelines that can automate sort of any process really that you want to. Quite commonly within sort of software development, it would be building the source code for an application, creating the output the computer can then understand, and then you would have a release pipeline that goes and deploys that to whether it's a virtual machine or a server somewhere that would then run that application. So that, like I say, traditionally within software development, that would be your process. There's lots of other processes you can do, like testing and automation of compliance checks and things like that as well, security testing on top of that. So lots of things that the CI/CD aspect can cover. So pipelines in general will allow you to automate many different things, and that's one of the biggest benefits as well for a development team is having, like I say, those consistent releases. So if something is missing from one person's machine and not another, you don't have to worry about that. It's all done centrally in one place, so it will be the same every single time. And there are a few sort of key things to remember about that in terms of building. So if you don't really want to be checking in your built version of the code, you want your raw, sort of human readable version of the code. But you can then have your pipeline to build that and then release that as well. And generally, you'd want to keep the same build between different environments that you might have, so development, testing, production, etc. You can have all of those stage gates. You can have approvals in there as well. So if before you deploy to production, you know, as a manager needs to approve that deployment, you can add things like that in. Like I said, you can add security testing in there as well. Compliance checks if you've got, need to check for defects in different systems and things like that. You can do all of that as well as part of that process. Really, you can automate whatever you want. And we have the concept of shifting left as well.
Yeah, what's that?
So shifting left is moving from having sort of issues and things found when things have been deployed. Generally, you would have your build or develop, build, test, release process for a developer. And traditionally, a lot of those issues would be found once it's been deployed. Shifting left is trying to bring all of those towards the front, to that develop time, to that build time, so that they can be picked up earlier, responded to earlier, and actually have less impact then as well later on down the line. So shifting left, a classic example of that is testing. So having automated tests that will run either every time somebody commits code or whenever you're doing a new build of your solution, your project. And this applies across all sorts of different sectors as well, not just application development. So your database, you can do database testing, security testing, and things like that as well as part of that. So trying to move as much of that as early as possible, so it never even gets to being deployed, never gets to into the hands of users. You can rectify that issue and then move on from there.
What sort of projects should you use DevOps on?
Well, traditionally, DevOps would have been within software development and application development, although we are seeing an awful lot more of it within the data space these days, which is really, really good. But you basically use it on any sort of project that you want. So web development and software development, as I said, traditionally, data engineering projects, database projects, data science projects. So MLOps as well is another sort of buzzword that's used to describe DevOps within a machine learning environment. Infrastructure and security projects as well. So infrastructure as code is becoming a much sort of bigger part of projects that are being delivered. So that's where you can define your resources and your infrastructure that you need to deploy within code, and then deploy those using DevOps practices as well. So you've got, again, the auditability of all your different settings and configuration for your infrastructure, so that if you need to make changes or you need to sort of easily redeploy, add another server or something like that, you've got a predefined definition of that. So again, less or more consistency, less errors along the way as well. And outside of sort of the code-based projects, you could actually use DevOps on sort of business improvement projects as well. So the boards element that we've talked about with the work item tracking and planning, you can use all of that for projects that don't have code and just need a standardized way of tracking the work that's being completed, whether that's through a Kanban board or a Scrum style approach with sprints and things like that as well.
And does DevOps work by having, if multiple projects and lots of different data sides come all together, can DevOps handle that?
Yeah, so we do see a lot with customers that they're trying to use or bring lots of different data systems together on data projects. And it can get very confusing if there are problems or if changes are made somewhere that then affects other systems. It's difficult to keep track of all of that. Whereas with DevOps in place, you can easily see if there's changes made to the code, you can see who made that, when they made it, and you've got those consistent releases and build pipelines to actually deploy those changes, so it's less likely to have an impact and bring something down by accident, because it will have gone through different, multiple stages of approval and review before it gets to that point.
And do you have any examples of using DevOps that have made it so much easier for a business to kind of see what's happening and gain that clear insight, whereas it could have taken much longer before?
So we have lots of examples of projects where we use DevOps. We use DevOps an awful lot, no matter sort of what the type of project is that we're delivering. There are some examples where DevOps has been a massive help, in particular on say a data project. There are occasions where there would be a database where lots of developers are making changes to it, and if one developer made a change that broke somebody else's code that they were working on, it's very difficult to keep track of that in this the old style where you just had a database, everybody just accessed the database and made changes to it. So trying to sort of have any visibility over what was going on inside the database was very, very difficult. But actually, by implementing a DevOps process, you then get traceability and auditability with code changes in the source and version control. You've got standardized release processes, so you can capture a lot of those breaking changes earlier, and also there's less chance of them even occurring because you've got standardized, consistent release processes in place. So we have had that happen on projects that we've done before, and actually seen massive improvements by just sort of speeding up the whole delivery process, because we're not having to try and figure out why something's broken, it's not working anymore. We've got sort of segregated ways that the team can collaborate together because we've got DevOps processes in place.
And what are some of the benefits that you've just spoken about? Why should I use Azure DevOps, really?
Well, DevOps in general has many benefits, including increased collaboration. So DevOps comes from development operations, and traditionally it would be development teams and operation teams. As soon as a piece of development is finished, it would be thrown over the fence to an operations team, and it would monitor it. And then if any issues come back, there'd be a bit of a back and forth between those teams. DevOps really is trying to break down the barriers and the silos between them, get those teams integrated together, communicating well. So increased collaboration is a massive part of that. That comes with the source and version control features, the work plannings to have so people have got visibility of what's going on a project. So yeah, increased collaboration is a massive feature, as is the sort of iterative release cycle and sort of getting value out there quicker to customers or internally within your organization. So having continuous integration pipelines, automated processes for building, releasing things. So much less error prone, more consistent, more reliable processes, so that you don't have one developer that's building something, another developer tries to build the same thing but doesn't have a package that's needed, causes all sorts of headaches and problems and things. So that's the old sort of traditional model. These days with DevOps and some of the benefits you get from that, you can avoid all of that, have sort of one-click releases.
All in one place with one team working together.
Everybody working towards the same goal as well. So better communication channels, better visibility of what needs to be achieved, what has been achieved as well, both at low level for developers and for stakeholders as well, to keep track of what's going on. So yeah, lots and lots of benefits built within the platform.
You've mentioned many great benefits of DevOps. What about from a business perspective? Would you say there are any key features, key components as to why a business should start using?
A lot of the benefits that development teams and people using DevOps get actually then sort of cascade up into the business benefits as well. We've mentioned around sort of the work tracking and planning, having that visibility. So developers are clear on what they need to build and what they need to develop, but then stakeholders are clear as well to see, well, here's everything that is due to be completed. Here's everything that has been completed. They can see, if there's anything that's blocked and particular reasons why. And there's lots of tools available within Azure DevOps to help with that as well. Lots of different planning styles. So DevOps is a bit of a family of different sort of philosophies and practices that you can use. So you can use agile delivery, for example, or you could have plan-driven projects as well. So the stakeholders have greater visibility over what what is being done within.
How would you get started in implementing DevOps? What would be your first steps to use DevOps?
It's worth sort of starting small and building up from there. So I think if you've got sort of no DevOps experience in the past, then it's probably worth picking a specific area that's good to that's going to give you the most value and not be too disruptive, because it can be quite a big change for people to go from doing things sort of everybody just does their own thing and a bit chaotic to becoming sort of a more DevOps focus, because it is a bit of a culture change as well, not just a system or a process change. So something like using source and version control, if you're not already doing that within your organization, that's probably a good place to start, because that will get you a lot of benefits very, very quickly. And from developers that are building solutions, that's a relatively easy change to start to implement, and they'll start to see benefits almost immediately from that, as will the business in terms of more consistent releases and deployments and less errors and things in the processes. So yeah, I think that's definitely sort of somewhere that they can start. The other areas to start would be around making sure everybody's on the same page with what you're trying to do from a DevOps perspective. So defining things early on. Quite often we'll see problems where people have different definitions for certain things. So with work tracking, for example, different statuses of a user story, as a piece of work that needs to be completed. If that user story is down as resolved, that might mean one thing to one person, but something else to another person. So having a clear definition on what those different statuses mean, what actually is a user story, what is a feature within your system. And there's not one right answer. It can vary. It's sort of going to be project dependent really on what you're trying to do. But as long as everybody's on the same page, then it's very clear to both developers and stakeholders within the business the exact status of the project and of the solution that you're building.
And would you say there are any common mistakes within the world of DevOps, pitfalls that people often fall into, and any tips to make sure you avoid those?
So quite often people will disassociate the project management from the delivery of the project. So they almost see sort of the DevOps as being this whole delivery thing, and then think that, we don't need to do any project management, it'll project manage itself. Yeah. There is still an element of project management that's needed in all of that. Like I said, there's different approaches for that. You can go an agile approach, you can go plan driven or a waterfall style. So there are different ways of doing it. Again, it's about being clear really within the team or in terms of how you're approaching that and making sure that's incorporated into the processes. So again, there's no one right answer to how you should be delivering a project. It's going to be based on that specific project and the context of it really, and how much, whether you can flex some of the scope, in which case then agile might be a more appropriate methodology to use, or if you've got a very specific scope but you can flex in terms of the resourcing or the time that's needed on that project, then maybe a plan driven or waterfall style approach might be more appropriate.
It seems so big, and we've spoken about so many different features of DevOps, from the planning to the actual deployment and source control. Would you say do you have, say, maybe 3 top tips or features that you would make sure that people use in every or most Azure DevOps cases?
I think if you've got code, then from my personal perspective, source and version control is non-negotiable. I think there's massive benefits that you gain from it, and that you don't necessarily, it doesn't add that much to your workflow really to warrant not implementing it. Not only just sort of the source and version control, sort of traceability and things that we've talked about, and auditability, but being able to tie everything back together. So from this requirement over here, this was the code that was implemented for that change, and then this is where it was deployed and in which environment and when. Being able to see all of that and easily having those rollbacks is a massive benefit to everyone within the organization. I think The other part of that would be the CI/CD processes as well. So trying to automate those build and release processes for whatever solution you're building, whether it's a database project, whether it's an app, whether it's data science, anything like that. So having those consistent pipelines in place will really, sort of immediately start to show benefits in less failed releases and deployments, and just having that more consistent process. The more consistent you process, the quicker you can release things. The quicker you can release things, the quicker you can realize value as well from your project.
Thank you very much for all of your advice and help with the DevOps, and thank you for watching. Make sure if you've got any questions or comments, leave a message down below and like the video and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.